Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. I pulled the radio off my hip before the screen door even clattered shut behind me. The wind carried a bit of dust through the morning light, and the air already felt dry in that way that promised another scorcher by noon. Zion doesn't ease into the day. It wakes up fast, sun creeping over the ridgelines, shadows evaporating off the canyon floor like smoke from a dying campfire. I stepped around the truck, keyed the mic, and kept walking. Ranger Harris checking in, heading up toward Angel's Landing. Trail closure still in effect? A beat of static, then the familiar rasp of Thompson's voice came through, half chewed by his usual back-of-throat gravel. Affirmative. Leave the signage in place. HQ hasn't cleared it. Something about an incident up on the ridge. Medicals involved. Copy that, I muttered, opening the truck door and tossing my pack onto the passenger seat. I'll check the gate and walk the approach. Make sure we don't have anyone ignoring it for Instagram likes. His chuckle came through faint, but tired. Wouldn't surprise me. I climbed in, started the engine, and rumbled down the maintenance road. The truck vibrated over the dirt and rock, tires kicking up grit that hung behind me in the mirror like fog. Cottonwoods flanked the edges of the drive, dry yellow leaves clinging to branches. As I passed one of the ranger sheds, I spotted 2 deer standing stiff in the shadows facing the road. They didn't flinch when I rolled by, just stared, eyes wide, not moving. That should have been the first sign, but I didn't think much of it then. Zion's got plenty of eerie moments. I reached the Angel's Landing lot a few minutes later. The usual, trail closed due to safety concerns signs were still zip-tied to the chain link across the entrance, and the gate itself was locked shut with fresh links. All good there. But what caught my eye were the boot prints in the dust. They weren't old. I crouched, traced the edges. 2 sets, maybe 3. People had walked up the trail since the last wind blew through. I radioed back. Thompson, I've got recent foot traffic past the barrier. Going up to intercept. He sighed through the static. Roger that. Just be careful, Harris. That call yesterday. Medical said the guy up there attacked someone. Bit him. Wouldn't stop. Didn't respond to pain. They're throwing around psychosis and synthetic drugs, but nothing's confirmed. Perfect, I muttered. Might be bath salts again. That hiker last year didn't stop screaming for 6 hours. I clipped the radio back and checked my belt. Knife, bear spray, Glock, flashlight. Standard. I left the long gun locked in the rack. Didn't expect I'd need it. Just another idiot on a closed trail. I hiked past the gate and started the incline. Morning sun hadn't yet burned off all the shade, so the trail had that mix of sharp shadow and glowing red sandstone. Not much noise. No birdsong. Even the ravens were quiet. A quarter mile up, I passed a crumpled granola bar wrapper. Too clean to be old. I picked it up and tucked it in a pouch, eyes scanning the switchbacks ahead. The wind shifted, brought the faint smell of sweat. Human, recent. I kept going, pace steady. Rounding the next bend, I paused when I caught a flash of color. Something bright blue against the rock. I raised my binoculars. About 60 yards ahead, just before the ridge narrows and the chains begin, someone was sitting slumped against the canyon wall. Hoodie pulled up, legs out straight. Looked young. I lowered the glass and kept moving. Hey, I called, keeping my tone calm. Trail's closed. You all right? No response, no movement. As I approached, I slowed. 10 feet out, I stopped. Something was off about the posture. The kid's chin was on his chest, arms hanging oddly like he'd been drained. No visible injuries, no blood, just a kind of wrongness in how still he was. I took one more step, reaching toward the radio. You okay, kid? You hurt? Then his head snapped up. Not turned, snapped. His mouth was slack, lips cracked and stained dark red. His eyes, something was wrong with them. Gray, milky, like a dead fish. No focus, no fear, just hunger. Then, with no sound but a wheeze from his throat, he lunged at me. I barely got the bear spray out before he was in reach. I hit him straight in the face with the full blast, expecting screams, coughing, anything, nothing. He kept coming. I staggered back, yelling at him to stop, hand dropping to my holster as I tripped on the trail's edge. He hit me hard, heavier than he looked, and slammed me against the rock. His mouth gnashed near my neck, spit flying. I could smell the rot on him. Blood, bile, something else. I fired twice into his chest. He dropped but didn't stop moving. I scrambled backward, dirt and rock tearing at my palms, gun raised. The kid, no, the thing, was crawling toward me, dragging itself like its bones didn't matter. No screams, no pain, just relentless movement. I aimed for the head and pulled the trigger again. That did it. I stood there, shaking, eyes locked on the body. Blood seeped into the trail, thick and dark. My breath rasped in my ears like wind in a canyon tunnel. This wasn't drugs. No way. I'd seen overdoses, psychosis, meth heads running naked through the brush. This was different. I grabbed my radio, thumbed the button. Dispatch, this is Harris. I've got a downed subject. Hostile behavior, possibly rabid, unresponsive to spray, shots fired, self-defense. Need backup and medical up at the ridge, fast. But Thompson didn't answer. The static changed. Another voice cut in, female, unfamiliar, not from the park network. Who is this? What channel is this? I blinked. Ranger Harris, Zion National Park. You're on an emergency channel. Who is this? Her voice trembled, fast and clipped. You have to leave populated areas. Don't go near people. It spreads by saliva, bites, blood contact. If anyone's bitten, isolate them. Don't trust. The signal cut out. I stared at the radio, then looked back at the kid, what was left of him. The smell was thick now. Death and heat and something old, like mold and rust. I checked my arms. No bites, just scrapes. My shoulder ached, but nothing deep. I should have called it in again, tried dispatch one more time, but something about that woman's voice over the emergency band pushed everything else aside. She wasn't reading a script. She sounded like someone standing knee-deep in a fire and begging whoever was listening to run the other way. Blood and saliva, that's what she said. And if that thing was still moving after 2 in the chest, she wasn't just panicking. She knew something. She'd seen it. The scream from above hadn't come again, but it still hung in the air like a flare trail. I grabbed my canteen, swished and spat. My mouth tasted like copper. The climb ahead twisted up toward the narrow section. Angels landing proper, the spine of the ridge with its chains bolted into the sandstone. Every year, people die up there trying to take selfies with God in the background. I've pulled bodies off those cliffs before. Nothing ever prepares you for the way a person folds after a 300-foot fall. The kid on the trail wasn't dead when I first found him. That's what bothered me most. He wasn't dead, just not alive. Like something that used to be human but forgot how to act like it. That lunge, the teeth, the blank stare, all of it felt primal, old, like watching a deer walk on 2 legs. The trail got tighter. Loose pebbles shifted under each step. My boots were steady, but the sweat starting to gather in my collar made it feel like I was climbing with a wet towel draped over my spine. I passed the first chain section and paused. Usually I'd clip in a nervous hiker here, talk them through the next stretch. It's a sheer drop on both sides. One of those places where a mistake means your last thought will be how fast the air feels. Halfway up the ridge, I saw the backpack, red, ripped open, lying against the wall. Zipper torn clean off. That wasn't normal animal damage. The contents were scattered. Trail mix, a cracked phone, a paperback mystery novel soaked in water. A half-eaten protein bar sat near the edge. Something had gnawed through the wrapper, but it wasn't done neatly. Whatever touched it didn't chew. It tore. I unholstered my pistol again, kept it low by my thigh, safety off. I moved slow now, not because I was afraid. I was. But it wasn't the kind of fear that makes you freeze. It was the kind that tells your body to go quiet, Stay low, feel the ground. The wind shifted just enough to bring another scent. Blood, and something burned. The next bend was just ahead. That's where the real ridge began. I rounded it and stopped cold. A man was kneeling in the center of the trail, facing away. He had both hands on something. I couldn't see what, and he wasn't moving much. Just little jerks of the shoulder, like he was adjusting something heavy. His shirt was red, not red-colored, red-soaked. I aimed the gun at him and took one step forward. He didn't react. I took another step and angled to the right. My boots scraped the sandstone just loud enough to be deliberate. Still nothing. When I finally saw what was beneath him, I understood, and I almost fired without thinking. It was a woman, or had been. Her face was gone, cheekbone visible through strips of skin, eyes half-lidded and drying in the sun. Her shirt was torn open, midsection raw and hollow. The man wasn't kneeling, he was feeding, hands buried in her stomach like he was pulling warmth out of the organs. I shouted once, not a word, just a bark of sound. He twitched. His whole body spasmed like a string got yanked, and then his head turned toward me. Mouth painted, nose broken, eyes like glass marbles sunk too deep into the skull. He shrieked. Not screamed, shrieked, like metal against metal. Then he charged. I didn't wait. I fired once, then again. The first round caught him in the chest. The second hit the collarbone, dropped him to a knee. He was up again in a blink. I had no time for careful aim. I fired twice more, last shot to the face, and watched him collapse mid-lunge. He twitched for a few seconds, then lay still. I stood over the woman, the remains of her. Her name tag was still on. April, it read. Below that, UNLV Outdoors Club. She looked college age. Probably came out here with friends. Took the wrong trail, found the wrong person. I looked around for others. The trail was empty. No voices, no crying, no other bodies. Yet. I pulled the satellite phone from my pack. Bars were non-existent, of course. I didn't expect different, but it was worth trying. The radio clicked when I tested it again. Just static now. Even the emergency channels were quiet. I crouched beside the second infected and checked for ID. Nothing but a driver's license and a torn lanyard. The license said California, expired last year. Didn't matter. No one was coming for either of them. I stood there too long. The sun shifted again, casting sharper shadows on the walls, and a fresh gust of wind blew the blood scent down the trail. That's when I realized the real problem. I'd fired 5 shots up here. Sound carries in canyons like a whisper in a cathedral. If there were more, they knew where I was now. And they were coming. I took the ridge back faster than I liked. Not a run, but something close. No room for missteps here. I didn't holster my pistol. I wanted it ready. As I descended toward the last switchback, I heard the first footfall behind me. Dry scrape on stone. Not close, but not far. Then a second, then more. I made it to the kid's body, the one I'd dropped earlier, just in time to see his hand move again. I thought I'd finished him, but he'd turned his head toward the sound. Bones didn't work right. Skin looked half detached now, but he was still trying to move. I stepped over him without firing. No point wasting another round on something that broken. I moved faster. The trail widened, then curved. The final descent came into view. Then I saw the hikers. 2 of them, mid-30s maybe, both breathing hard and looking up the trail. A man and a woman, both bloodied, scraped, eyes wild. "Back down," I shouted, waving them toward the lot. "Get to the ranger truck." They didn't argue. The man helped the woman move. She had a limp, left knee wrapped in an old bandana. Her shirt was dark with blood, but I couldn't tell whose. Behind us, more of them appeared. I didn't count. I didn't need to. Grey faces, torn hands, bodies that didn't bend right. They moved fast, too fast for corpses, but not with control, not like people. more like dogs that had lost the scent but hadn't lost the bite. We made the lot in 3 minutes, maybe less. I opened the truck door and shoved the two into the back. I jumped in, slammed the door shut, threw the rifle onto the seat beside me, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine stuttered once. I punched the dash. Come on. It caught. Tires peeled dust as we turned down the trail and headed back toward the main access road. Only when we passed the shed and the cottonwoods again did I breathe fully. I checked the mirror. No movement. No pursuit. Not yet. The woman in the back was shaking, eyes wide. Her companion had blood on his face, but it wasn't his. He looked stunned. Not crying. Not speaking. Just staring through me. I drove with one hand on the wheel and the other on my pistol. Every bump in the road felt like a warning. The park radio was still dead. Cell reception wouldn't kick in until we were well past the south campground, maybe farther. But I wasn't heading to the visitor center. Not yet. I turned off at the old gravel path that curved north toward the maintenance garage. Most of the tourists didn't know it existed. It wasn't on any maps handed out at the front gate, and we didn't advertise it during orientation briefings. It was built after the fire season of 2011, when a lightning strike knocked out power across the southern ridge. Someone with a brain in DC decided we needed a hardened repeater station, something independent of the park's main lines. Solar array, shortwave transmitter, backup diesel, the works, just in case. The station sat tucked behind a row of stacked stone sheds and supply trailers, camouflaged in beige paint and rust. I pulled up close, checked the rear view. The two survivors hadn't said a word since we got in the truck. The woman still trembled, hands clasped over her knee. The blood on her leg was dry now, crusted in layers, but she didn't look pale. No fever, no spasms. Her breathing was fast but steady. I watched her eyes. Alert, not glazed. If she was turning, I figured I'd see it by now. The man finally spoke. His voice cracked like someone who'd shouted themselves raw. We didn't know where to go. The rangers weren't answering. She got hurt trying to run from one of those things. It was her brother. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to have that conversation with him. I just stepped out, racked the rifle I'd brought from the seat, and scanned the tree line behind the garage. Nothing but dust, stone, and silence. I unlocked the side entrance to the comms room, waved them inside, then shut and bolted the door behind us. No windows in this building, no skylights. Just 2 rooms, equipment on one side, a backup cot and rations closet on the other. The smell of old paper and diesel hit me as soon as I stepped in. The emergency setup was still intact. The battery bank read green. The solar panel log showed good input all morning. I flipped the switch and listened as the shortwave unit hummed to life. Most people think of radios as push-button things, press and talk, like a CB in a truck stop. But this rig wasn't built for ease. It was meant for disaster. I ran through the manual sequence. Power, tuner, band select, emergency override. Then I thumbed the mic and keyed in the park's internal emergency frequency. Still dead. I tried the National Emergency Broadcast Band. Static. NOAA weather band. Nothing. Then I turned the dial to a general shortwave range and scanned slowly. At 7.400 megahertz, I caught a burst of voice. Clipped. Male. Then silence again. I rolled the tuner back. Nothing. Then, 2 notches later, another signal. This time a woman's voice, garbled but steady. Hospital has fallen. Repeat. This is St. Mary's. We cannot hold. If you are receiving this, avoid downtown. Infection is airborne near Zone 6. Do not approach checkpoints. Do not wait for FEMA transport. Lock your homes. Conserve water. Trust no one showing symptoms. I stepped back. St. Mary's was a small medical center down in Hurricane, about 45 minutes from the edge of the park. If it had fallen, that meant the infection wasn't isolated to trailheads or campers. It had spread through populated zones, through towns. The man behind me had sunk to the floor, knees drawn up, arms around them. His voice was a whisper now. We tried calling from the ridge, Phones didn't work. We thought it was just the service. Then someone started running toward us, screaming. No words, just screaming. We thought he was hurt. His eyes were wrong, like glass. He stopped, swiped a hand down his face, and then went quiet again. The woman still hadn't spoken. She sat in the corner, back against the supply rack, clutching a roll of gauze like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. Her hands weren't bloody, not fresh anyway. I crouched and reached for her leg. She flinched, then let me unwrap the makeshift bandage. A long gash ran down the side of her knee, looked like she caught it on rock, not teeth. The skin was torn, but the edges were clean. No punctures, no bite arc. I poured iodine over it, repacked it with gauze, and taped it shut with what was left of the medical kit. "You're gonna be all right," I said, but I wasn't sure if I meant her or me. The emergency system chirped again. Another frequency kicked in. This time, the voice was clearer. Male, Midwestern accent, probably reading from a script. "This is a regional broadcast. If you are receiving this signal, you are in an active quarantine zone. Do not attempt to enter urban areas. All roads in and out of major cities are closed. Interstate checkpoints have been deactivated. Do not rely on emergency services. If you are in a national park, shelter in place. Repeat, shelter in place." That was the last thing I wanted to hear. I stood, walked to the lockers, and pulled the inventory log from the clipboard. The garage had 2 quads, one still gassed up. Fuel stores were low, maybe 6 gallons left. Enough for a short run, nothing long range. No medivac would reach us now. No ranger reinforcements from neighboring parks. If the roads were closed and checkpoints abandoned, we weren't just alone, we were abandoned. I opened the top locker and retrieved the old laminated map. Every ranger kept their own routes memorized, but this one had elevation lines and power grid notes. I circled 3 possible fallback points: the Kolob station up north, the ranger housing dorms near Springdale, and the shuttle depot garage. The woman finally spoke. "What happens when we run out of food?" Her voice was calm, not scared, just level. That was worse. I didn't answer. Not yet. I just folded the map and tucked it into my vest. Then I checked my sidearm, counted ammo. 12 rounds left on me. 4 boxes locked in the truck's rear compartment. The rifle was nearly full, but I didn't want to go loud unless I had to. Something scraped the metal outside. Not loud, just one of those sounds that shouldn't be there. A toe dragging across aluminum. I raised my hand and everyone fell silent. The scrape came again, then a thud. 1 knock, then nothing. I crept to the back of the building and peeked through the bolt slit. A dark shape moved between the maintenance trailers. A man maybe, limping, hard to see. Then another behind him, slower, hunched. No sound from them, no talking. Just movement, like sleepwalkers bumping through brush. One had a broken arm that swung loose like a rope. The woman looked at me and whispered, "How many?" 4, maybe 5, I answered. "If they're like the others, gunshots won't stop them unless you hit the head." Her eyes darted to the side wall where the tools were stored. Hatchets, bolt cutters, a fire axe. She reached up and grabbed the axe, not gently, and gripped it like she'd already decided she wouldn't freeze when the time came. That was something. The man, her friend or brother, I still didn't know, stood and positioned himself behind the generator's housing. Not brave, but not useless either. The infected circled the trailers. One of them sniffed the air. His nose was shredded, face a pulp of old wounds. But he still smelled us. I could see it. The moment of recognition. He turned, eyes locking on the door, and charged. I didn't wait for the crash. I fired through the slit. The round punched through his skull and dropped him flat. The others turned like a wave, stumbling toward the sound. I fired twice more, dropping a second. The last 2 scattered to either side of the station, out of view. The woman braced near the door, weapon raised. The man pulled a crowbar from the shelf and held it low, arms shaking but steady. We waited. A minute passed. Then another. The third infected reappeared at the front window. I stepped out of sight and signaled the woman to move to the rear. If he breached, we couldn't have all our backs against the wall. He tried the window first. It didn't open, obviously. Then the door. The knob jiggled once, then twice, then harder. I pointed at the hinge bolts, mouthed "back up," and kicked the door wide as he leaned in. The woman didn't hesitate. The axe came down in a clean arc and split his collar. He dropped twitching. Not dead yet. I stepped forward and finished it. We dragged the body out by the boots and left it by the corner of the trailer shed. No time for burial. No time for questions. I checked again for the fourth one, the one that hadn't shown himself during the fight, but the tree line was still. Maybe he wandered off. Maybe he was watching. Either way, we couldn't afford to stay there any longer. That door wouldn't hold under another hard push, not with the hinges loose from the kick, and the smell, that reek of iron and bile, would carry. I shut the door, bolted it again, and went to the truck. The two of them followed without asking. We packed what we could, some canned food, a shortwave unit, fresh gauze, my backup weapon from the locker, a pump-action shotgun I'd barely fired in 6 years of service. I checked the shells. Buck, good enough at close range. The rifle stayed slung across my chest, one in the chamber. The woman looked steadier now, more alert. Whatever adrenaline had hit her after swinging the axe had burned off the fog. Her eyes tracked movement like a ranger would, carefully, without darting. The man still lagged, slower to respond, but his breathing was normal, and he followed instruction. He helped resecure the gear without needing to be told twice. I watched their hands while they worked. No tremors, no signs of fever, no sign of that wrong look I'd seen in the others. We drove toward the south campground slowly, watching every turn. I kept off the main roads and followed the back fire trails where I could. Even if it meant chewing through the truck's shocks over dry riverbeds and roots, I didn't want to risk the bridge into town. If the highway was really closed like that broadcast said, there could already be panicked drivers or blockades. If there were infected down there, I wouldn't see them until we were boxed in. The plan was simple. There was a backup fuel depot near the shuttle maintenance area, just a few miles past the campground. If we could refuel and restock, we'd have options. Go north toward the Kolob Reservoir, or cut west into the less populated side canyons. I didn't think there was a safe route into town anymore. If the infection reached St. George or even touched Springdale, there'd be thousands of people trying to flee, and most wouldn't make it. The canyon would trap them. It was beautiful, but it was a cage. We were halfway through the old maintenance loop when I saw the first sign that we weren't alone. A flash of reflection caught in the tree line. High, near eye level. Not animal eyes. Glass. Someone was holding something. Binoculars maybe. Scope. I slowed and killed the headlights. The truck idled in neutral. I stepped out with the rifle raised and scanned the ridge. Nothing. But I knew I saw it. Not a trick of the light. Not a reflection from stone. It moved before I looked. Trained eyes twitched just a half second before contact. That reflex doesn't lie. Someone had eyes on us. The woman joined me outside the passenger door, shotgun ready. She didn't speak, just followed my gaze. The man stayed in the truck, didn't argue, knew better. A good survivor knows when to move and when to freeze. Something shifted to our left, far edge of the tree line. I turned, aimed low, not center mass, just a warning, and called out, "We're not infected. Don't move fast. Don't run. Just speak." Silence, then crunching leaves. A figure stepped into the open. Civilian, middle-aged, wearing a faded long-sleeve thermal and cargo pants. No gun that I could see, but his right arm was bandaged and crusted red from elbow to palm. He raised his other hand slowly. "I heard your engine. Didn't know if you were park rangers or one of them." I kept the rifle up. "What happened to your arm?" He hesitated, just long enough for me to think about the trigger. "Fence wire. Got stuck trying to get into the housing loop. There were others with me, 3 people. One of them didn't make it. We got separated at the gate." The story came too smooth. No stutters, no uncertainty. I didn't trust him, neither did the woman. I glanced at her, and she angled her stance slightly to give herself better balance, like she was ready for him to bolt. I gestured toward the truck. We're heading toward the depot. You can walk behind us, 20 feet back. You get close without being asked, and you won't make it through the night, you understand me? He nodded slowly. His hand stayed up. We moved on. The ride to the depot was tense. The stranger stayed behind the truck as ordered, walking slow but steady. I watched him in the mirror the whole time. Every stumble, every pause, I clocked. If he'd been bit, if he'd been lying, I was ready to drop him, but nothing came. No chase, no rage, just silence. We reached the depot gate just before dusk. I left the truck idling and jogged to the side panel, keys ready. The padlock hadn't been touched. That was good. The last thing I needed was a scavenger crew stripping fuel and leaving the tanks dry. I unlocked the side shed, yanked the cover off the backup generator, and flipped the manual start switch. It roared to life on the third try. Lights flickered inside the garage bay. The pumps came online. We refueled the truck first, then every spare container we could find. A red metal jerry can, 3 old plastic water bottles, even a soup pot. Didn't matter. Fuel was fuel. Inside the depot's side room, we found more supplies. Old emergency rations, water tabs, canned goods with dented labels. I shoved everything useful into crates and stacked them in the truck bed, covered with a tarp. That's when I heard it. Voices. Not screams. Voices. Coming from the west end of the depot, past the perimeter fence. Low, tired, talking. I signaled the others to stay put and circled the garage. Behind the tool shed, I saw them. 3 people, huddled near a fire pit. 2 men, 1 woman, all in civilian clothes, backpacks stacked behind them. They weren't infected, not visibly, no blood, no erratic movement. But one of the men was armed, AR-style rifle slung low. I stepped out with hands visible, rifle pointed down but ready. You're on federal property. This is a ranger facility. We've got supplies and transport. Who are you? The man with the rifle stood. The way he moved told me everything. Confident, deliberate. Not just a gun owner, someone who'd trained. Maybe military, maybe security. Not a weekend warrior. Didn't think anyone was still breathing in this canyon, he said. We're not looking for trouble. Neither are we, I replied. You sick? Bit? No. He looked at the woman, who nodded. We came up from Laverkin. Roads are blocked. Military convoys turned back. People panicked. Overran their own checkpoints. You see infected? He nodded once. Hundreds. We brought them in under one condition. No surprises, no secrets. They agreed. I didn't trust them, but I didn't trust anyone. That didn't mean I was leaving them outside with nightfall coming, and predators on every side. I'm not cruel, not yet. We posted watches, 1-hour rotations. Everyone took a turn. We parked the truck against the garage wall, set up makeshift beds with gear bags and thermal blankets. The depot lights stayed off once we finished setup. No sense broadcasting our position. The night was loud. Coyotes howled in the distance, but not like usual. Shorter, sharper bursts. Panicked even. Once, near midnight, we heard something slam against the garage door. Hard. Then again. Then silence. No one spoke for at least a minute. I saw flashlights being gripped tighter. One of the newcomers, Seth, the guy with the AR, had his weapon aimed low, barrel twitching with the rhythm of his breath. The girl he was traveling with, Clara, had already crawled under a canvas tarp and gone rigid, not asleep, just trying to disappear. That kind of fear runs deep. You can't fake it, and you can't talk it down. You survive it, or you don't. I didn't open the door. Not then. No good ever came from checking a noise in the dark. The infected didn't move like animals. They didn't test scent or territory. but they still responded to light and noise. It's the hunger, or whatever version of instinct was still running the motor, and we weren't in a position to start a fight inside a building with one exit. We waited out the rest of the night in rotating silence. Nobody fully slept. You close your eyes in this kind of world, and the things you imagine are worse than the ones outside the door. I spent most of my shift tracing the map again under dim lantern light, reviewing elevation lines and terrain I already knew by heart, just to give my hands something to do. The route west to Rockville was gone, confirmed by the shortwave reports from park rangers who never called back after their final status updates. Kolob Terrace was risky, even if it looked clear. It was higher ground but exposed. Too easy to get pinned. The only reasonable choice left was to break south into the abandoned side canyons along the Paris Trail, try to move by foot toward the ranger housing loop near Springdale. The place had its own water tank, backup supplies, and most important, cinderblock walls instead of trailers. Not ideal, but it might buy us a few more days, if the town hadn't already burned. Morning came like it always does out here, sharp, golden, and brutal. The sun lights up the cliffs before it hits the ground, and for a second, it tricks you into believing it's going to be a normal day. That illusion broke when I finally opened the garage door. 3 distinct dents stared back at me from chest level. Not tool strikes, not animals, blunt force, human height. No footprints, just dried blood. 2 smeared handprints on the steel. One of the fingers was missing from the right hand. Torn, not cut. The streak where the stump dragged across the metal made my stomach turn in a way I didn't have words for. The woman who came with me from Angel's Landing, her name was finally given as Marcy, stood beside me and stared at the stains like she'd already seen them before. She didn't say anything. She just reached into the crate, pulled out another magazine for the shotgun, and quietly started checking shells. That was the moment I stopped thinking of her as a civilian. We loaded the truck again. Fuel topped off, spare gas in the jerry cans, food and water redistributed. I made the call that anyone not carrying gear was carrying a weapon. No more passive riders. Everyone contributed. Clara and her brother took pistols. Seth kept his rifle, and I gave Marcy the spare sidearm from my glove box. She never even checked the safety, just nodded and holstered it. That woman had seen something out there. Something bad. We took the back trail south, cutting along the riverbank toward the Paris Loop. It was slow. The truck could barely handle the terrain. Ruts too deep, brush too close. But I wasn't about to roll down Highway 9 like a parade float and announce ourselves to whoever, or whatever, was still in the valley. About a mile in, we reached the footbridge that crosses near the wetland bend. That's when we saw the convoy. 6 vehicles, all military surplus, Humvees, a transport truck, even a flatbed with sandbags stacked on the sides. But they weren't moving. They weren't even intact. One of the Humvees had flipped on its side, windshield shattered, smoke blackened. The others were riddled with bullet holes. No uniforms in sight, but spent casings littered the gravel. 5.56, 9mm, even 12-gauge shells scattered like confetti. I parked behind a tree cluster and killed the engine. We approached on foot, weapons ready. The bodies were mostly burned, stacked in a ditch near the transport truck. Someone tried to cremate them fast, but only got halfway. Legs poked out from the ash, blackened boots still attached. A few still wore remnants of tactical vests, no insignias. Not regular army, not National Guard either. These were contractors, private, maybe state-funded, maybe freelance. The infected don't carry guns, so I knew what this meant. Whoever they fought wasn't just walking dead. Someone turned on someone else. Panic does that. Fear. A scratch becomes suspicion. A cough becomes a death sentence. All it takes is one person to scream, "He's infected," and the rules break. We salvaged what we could. Ammo, a pair of flares, 2 radios that might still charge if we had solar, a medical pouch with real morphine, and 2 sealed IV kits. I stuffed those into the side pocket of my bag like they were gold. Clara was the one who found the child. She'd wandered into the woods behind the transport, looking for water, and came back holding a girl's pink jacket, stained and torn. No body, just the jacket. The way she held it, arms stiff, like she expected the kid to come take it back. I didn't ask her what else she saw. Didn't want to know. We pressed on. Every 100 feet felt longer. Marcy rode shotgun now, map across her lap, scanning for choke points. Seth took rear guard in the bed of the truck, standing with one hand on the mounted bar, eyes on the tree line. The others sat in the middle row, quiet, watching the brush. We reached the housing loop at 11:38 a.m. The place was empty. No doors kicked in, no windows smashed. Just vacant, like everyone left in the middle of packing. Plates in sinks, books on tables, shoes by the door, a half-eaten sandwich in the rec hall fridge. The power was out, but everything else remained like it was waiting. We cleared the buildings in formation, 2 per house, quiet, systematic. I watched for signs of struggle. Nothing. No blood. No broken furniture. But in one of the dorm rooms, I found a note, pinned to the wall with a broken pen. It read, "We heard it was in Vegas, then St. George, then it was here. We left before it got dark. If anyone finds this, don't wait. They don't knock. They don't ask. They just come." That night, we barricaded all the first-floor windows, parked the truck behind the building, and stacked furniture against the doors. No campfires, no noise. We took turns eating in the dark. Dry rations, crackers and protein bars. Nobody asked for anything hot. Seth and I stayed up talking in low tones while the others tried to rest. He used to run security for a logistics company out of Phoenix. Said when their drivers stopped reporting in from the north side, management pulled out of the city overnight. He stayed behind to get his sister, found her walking barefoot near an abandoned gas station, covered in blood that wasn't hers. He didn't go into more detail than that. He didn't need to. Everyone had their version of that story now. Someone you couldn't get to in time, or someone you did get to but couldn't recognize anymore. The moment when the world stopped being explainable in familiar terms. I didn't ask what happened between then and now. I could already guess. The roads weren't full because people fled. They were full because they were eaten. The housing loop had a water tank behind the administration cabin. Maybe 800 gallons if the gauges were right. Gravity-fed pipes, a hand pump backup, and a sealed secondary bladder system underground in case of power loss. Standard infrastructure for remote park operations. What made it unusual now was that it worked. Not clean, not ideal, but water flowed. I filled every canteen and checked the filters, then triple-checked the doors and windows before settling back against the wall near the entrance. The front door was barricaded with an old bookshelf and 2 desks pressed against it side by side. A metal filing cabinet braced the handle from the inside, crude but solid. Clara mumbled in her sleep on one of the cots. Marcy, I thought, hadn't slept at all. She was sitting in the dark near the back window, just listening to the wind. The others, except Seth, were scattered across the lounge area, eyes closed, but no one fully out. Even in the dead quiet, sleep didn't come easy. The infected had a way of invading your rest without being there. Their sounds, their broken pacing, their hungry silence. Around 3 in the morning, we heard it again. Something dragging. I didn't move at first, just sat there, listening. My ears had learned to sort natural from unnatural in the wilderness, but this one landed somewhere in between. A dry, deliberate scrape. Once, then again, faint, like it was coming from inside the walls. I stood slowly and looked at Seth, who was already gripping the AR with both hands, barrel up. His expression was stone. No fear, no confusion, just alert. The dragging came again, closer. Then, a sharp wooden crack, small, like a beam splintering under pressure. I motioned to Marcy, and she rose without hesitation, shotgun at low ready. I led her down the hallway toward the rear offices. The door at the end, the one I knew we'd locked from the outside, was open an inch. That door had no reason to be open. We hadn't gone in there since arriving. I approached slow, rifle up, and kicked it the rest of the way in. Nothing. Just an empty desk, some filing cabinets, a flipped-over chair, and a busted air duct cover hanging half loose from the ceiling panel. I looked up. That's when I saw the hatch. A square opening into the attic crawl space, barely 2 feet by 2 feet, smeared with something dark. Not enough to be blood, not sprayed, but rubbed, like someone bracing their hands on the wood to pull themselves up, or down. I didn't say anything. I just backed out of the room, shut the door, and slid a metal rod through the handle brackets. There wasn't enough manpower or ammo to start clearing crawl spaces in the dark. At dawn, we checked it properly. Seth boosted me up through the hatch, flashlight and sidearm in hand. The attic space was low and dusty, no floor, just joists and old insulation, rat droppings, empty boxes, then something new. A torn piece of blue canvas, part of a hiker's tent, a dried trail of smeared handprints leading from the far end, and finally, in the corner near the vent shaft, a shoe, child-sized, no foot in it, just the shoe. Whatever had come in through the roof wasn't there anymore, or it still was, and just knew how to stay quiet. We sealed the hatch with plywood and screws from the supply closet, bolted every access point we could find, and we moved everyone into the same central cabin from that point forward. Safety in numbers. Visibility. If something made it in again, we'd all know it. Midday brought heat. No wind. Just that smothering kind of canyon warmth that makes the dust hang in the air and the horizon ripple. I climbed to the roof of the rec hall with binoculars and scanned the valley. Movement to the west. A group. 15 or 20 figures, walking in rough formation through the dried riverbed near the base of the canyon wall. Too far to hear, too far to tell if they were infected. But they weren't moving like the others. They were slower, not in the way infected usually are, not that lurching sprint, but truly slow, deliberate, like they were injured or sleepwalking. A few broke formation and wandered, others just stood. One fell, didn't get back up. It didn't make sense. If they were infected, they'd keep moving. If they were survivors, they'd be waving or making noise. That's when I saw the first one collapse, then another. One of the figures dropped to its knees, then face first into the sand. Seth came up beside me with his scope. "They're starving," he muttered. "Jesus, they're starving to death." I kept watching. It looked like he was right. Whatever those things were, they didn't just hunt endlessly. They needed fuel. Maybe not like us. Maybe not food and water, but something. And whatever it was, they were running out of it. We counted 11 that dropped over the next hour. The rest eventually wandered off toward the east ridge, moving slower with every step. That gave us a chance. By afternoon, we made a decision. We'd seen enough to know Zion wouldn't hold. Too open, too exposed. The infected weren't coordinated, but they didn't need to be. Their numbers alone would do the work. And now that we'd learned they could climb, crawl through ventilation, navigate structures, walls weren't going to keep us safe forever. The goal became escape, not just survival. There was an old ranger airstrip west of the Kolob Canyons, a dirt runway and an equipment hangar used during fire season for aerial scouts. Most of us had forgotten it even existed, but I remembered a story about a pilot who parked his personal plane there during a rock slide years back. The Forest Service never cleared the record. If it was still there, and if it could still fly, it was the only way out of the canyon that didn't involve crossing 3 infected zones and 2 collapsed bridges. The others didn't argue when I brought it up. By now, we all understood what the situation was. The infected weren't going to thin out. We weren't going to get rescued. The National Guard had either pulled out or collapsed entirely. There were no helicopters, no convoys. The only voice on the shortwave in the last 36 hours was a broken loop from Salt Lake City warning of perimeter breaches and asking authorized responders to report. It didn't sound like anyone was reporting. I traced the route twice. once on the laminated map, and once in my head. From the ranger housing loop, we'd have to go west through Wildcat Canyon. The main trail had switchbacks, but the terrain was wide enough to keep visibility. That mattered now. Getting ambushed wasn't about animal attacks or rock slides anymore. It was about not letting one of them get within lunging range. From there, we'd cross the old cattle fence line and climb into the ridges above Hop Valley. If we hit the right elevation and headed northwest, we'd reach the airstrip by early afternoon, assuming the trail was clear and no one had taken the plane already. We left just after dawn. The temperature hadn't broken 50 degrees yet, but it wouldn't stay cool for long. I wanted distance before the sun made the rock hot enough to shimmer. Clara walked light and fast. Marcy had the shotgun on a sling across her back, carrying the medical gear. Seth carried a rifle and the only scoped binos. I led with the radio, compass, and Glock ready. The others stayed tight in the middle. No stragglers. The first 2 miles were quiet. Birds moved in the distance. Rabbits darted between brush. Nothing strange. Just enough normal to make you second-guess the last few days. I caught Seth looking around more than once, like he couldn't shake the feeling that this was a trap. And maybe it was. The world doesn't give you calm unless it's saving something worse for later. When we crossed into Wildcat Canyon, we found the first sign we weren't the only ones trying this route. A body lay in the trail just below a rock shelf. Male, late 20s, backpack half torn. His foot was caught in a crevice, twisted unnaturally, broken during a fall maybe. His face was gone, torn down to the teeth. Nothing left but gristle and jaw. Marcy checked the pack. Empty, no food, no water. Whoever he was, he'd been desperate. Probably tried to outrun something and broke his ankle doing it. Then bled out waiting for it to find him. I said nothing, just moved us on. The smell of him would bring others. Around the 4th switchback, we heard movement on the ridge above, not the wind, heavier, thudding in short bursts. Seth raised his rifle and pointed up. 5 infected, all clustered near a dead tree stump. They hadn't seen us yet. 3 crouched and picked at something on the ground. The 4th was upright but slow, swaying in place like it had forgotten what it was doing. The 5th was smaller, thin, maybe a woman. She was hunched low but fast, moving around the others in a crouch, sniffing at the air. She stopped suddenly, looked toward our trail, then froze. We ducked behind a rock outcropping. Her head tilted, then she shrieked. It wasn't a scream, it was a summoning, like a flare gun fired with your throat. A sound meant to travel. She dropped onto all 4s and ran toward us like her spine wasn't connected. The others followed. We opened fire. Seth dropped the upright one with a single shot to the head. Marcy nailed the croucher with a buck round that cracked ribs into shrapnel. I emptied half a mag into the female. She didn't slow, didn't even stumble, just climbed, clawed, and lunged. Clara screamed. I stepped forward and put 2 in her face from less than 10 feet away. The momentum still carried the body into me. We both went down. Her weight was more bones than meat. Her skin felt like bark. I shoved her off, got up, and checked the others. One of the new guys, name was Brian I think, was bleeding from a scratch across the cheek. Not deep, maybe from the rocks, not a bite. He said he was fine. We gave him iodine anyway and moved fast. The rest of the climb into Hop Valley was uneventful. That word had no meaning now. Uneventful just meant we didn't die. We moved over the cattle fence in pairs, watched both directions, and covered each crossing with rifles up. Just past the tree line, we found a warning sign. Painted in red on the rock face, infected breath, do not climb. The phrase made no sense at first. Infected don't breathe, at least not like us. But then I saw what they meant. A cluster of corpses, 3 or 4, lay tangled in a rock crevice below the ridge path. They were decomposing fast. Too fast. Flies swarmed like fog. The skin was bubbling, peeling. Green-grey vapors curled off the bodies when the sun hit them. It stank like acid. I held my breath and signaled the others to cover their faces. We cut a wide arc around it, Upwind. Didn't want to test theories we didn't understand. By mid-afternoon, the canyon widened and leveled out. The dirt got softer. Loose pebbles gave way to compact clay. That was when I saw it. The runway. A narrow strip of earth, dead straight, tucked between two shallow ridges. Faded white lines still marked the edges. At the far end stood the hangar, half collapsed but still upright. The doors were slightly open. We approached slow. No one spoke. Every step felt like it had a weight tied to it. The silence wasn't comforting. It was loaded. The hangar interior was musty, coated in dust. Old oil drums sat in the corners. Ropes, tarps. A workbench littered with broken tools. And there, in the center, covered by a grey sheet and 100 prayers worth of dust, a Cessna 182. Single prop, high wing, 4-seater, emergency beacon taped to the dash. It looked intact. Seth broke the silence first. "That'll do." We set to work immediately. Checked the tank, dry, checked the lines. Clear. Battery was dead, but we had 2 spares from the depot. Fuel was the issue. The tank needed aviation gas, AV gas, but it had run short distance on high-octane auto fuel in an emergency. We poured what we had, enough for maybe 100 miles. If we kept it light, maybe more. I'd never flown one of these, but Seth had. 4 years in forestry support. Claimed he'd put a similar model down in a dry lake bed once during a thunderstorm. Walked out with a cracked rib and a story that made him laugh every time he told it. Today he wasn't laughing. He was already inside the cabin, checking the instruments, working the primer pump, muttering procedures under his breath like a man praying for just one more break. Outside, the rest of us stripped our gear down to the essentials. Food, water, weapons. No room for tents, no luxuries, no backup plans. The plane would carry 4 safely. 5 would be a squeeze. 6, and we'd be pushing the envelope. There were 7 of us. We all knew what that meant, but no one said it. We just started dividing weight and pretending someone had already made the decision. The sun had dipped behind the western ridge when I heard the first sound, the kind that stops you cold, a dry snap in the trees. Not big, not aggressive, just one sharp step, but it didn't come from above or below. It came from the hangar wall, just past the edge of shadow. Then another, a slow, dragging foot. I stepped to the hangar door, rifle raised, and looked toward the rocks. 2 figures emerged first. Broken silhouettes, staggered gaits. One dragging a leg so bent it looked like rubber. Their arms didn't sway. Their heads didn't scan. They just moved in a straight line. Then more. 4, 6, 9. They came from every direction except the sky. Silent, steady. Like the plane's engine had whispered to them through the dirt. The wind changed, and with it came the smell. Earth, rot, and blood. The same bitter reek I'd learned to associate with death that still moves. I called out for the others to load up. Seth shouted that we had 1 more minute, maybe less. Marcy handed Clara up into the cabin, then tossed the shotgun inside and climbed after her. The young guy, Brian, hesitated, still standing with his hand on the fuel drum, like he couldn't believe it was real. Then the infected reached the hangar. The first one charged. I dropped him with a single round to the head. Another appeared behind him, a woman this time, mouth slack and hair hanging in clumps. Her right hand was shredded to bone. I didn't wait. 2 rounds. Gone. The others were circling. 15. Maybe more now. Too many. Too close. I looked at Brian. Run. He didn't. The third infected was faster, almost sprinting. He slammed into Brian before I could react, teeth catching his shoulder in a flash of motion. Brian screamed and tried to push him back, but it was too late. The sound changed. Pain to panic. I shot the infected, but Brian was already down. I dragged him by the collar into the shadows of the hangar. His skin was already losing color, eyes unfocused. I didn't need to check the wound to know it was deep, And not just physical, he wouldn't make it. He looked at me like he understood, said nothing, just nodded. I turned to the rest of the group. Seth shouted that the engine was primed, blades spinning. Clara reached out for me from the rear door, her face pale and wet with sweat. Marcy pulled her back and waved at me to get in. I hesitated. Not because I was afraid, not even because I doubted we'd make it. I hesitated because something about this entire moment felt wrong. I didn't want to leave. Not here. Not yet. Not with Brian dying, and a dozen infected closing in, and a plane we hadn't tested. But I had to move. We were out of time. I sprinted to the open hatch, tossed the rifle in, climbed after it, and slammed the door shut just as a fist landed against the fuselage. The plane shook. Clara screamed. Seth pushed the throttle. We rolled hard, tires bouncing over the uneven dirt. One of the infected tried to climb the wing and slipped off under the spin of the prop. The plane tilted, caught wind, and for a second, we weren't sure it would lift. Then the ground dropped away. We were in the air. The horizon opened wide below us. Canyon ridges turned to waves of brown and red, and the bodies below became nothing more than shadows stumbling in frustration. For the first time in days, we were above it. Not safe, but above it. Nobody said anything for a long time. Just the hum of the engine and the quiet sound of breathing. Seth kept his hands steady on the yoke, scanning the sky ahead like it might betray him. I stared out the window at the Utah desert, empty and stretching to forever. Marcy finally broke the silence. Where now? We didn't know. There was no plan after this. No airstrip we could confirm. No landing zone with fuel or food. We had 100 miles of range. Maybe more if the wind stayed friendly. That might get us to a rural patch near the Arizona line. Might not. I closed my eyes, leaned back against the seat, and let the hum of the engine carry me somewhere quiet for the first time in what felt like a year. But before I drifted, I heard the radio crackle. Just once, a burst of static. Then a voice. Faint, male, slow, barely readable through the hiss. This is Mesa Field Station, Southern Nevada. Repeat, any aircraft. Please respond. Seth looked at me. I reached for the receiver and pressed the button. This is Park Ranger Unit Echo. In the air. 4 survivors. Repeat, 4 alive. The reply came back broken, but clear enough. Safe. Here. Controlled perimeter. Land strip. East sector. Watch. Fuel. You'll only get 1 shot. Seth adjusted course. The sun was starting to drop. Shadows long across the ridges. Fuel needle dipping toward its last third. We didn't speak again. The engine hummed. The sky stretched wide. The desert below turned gold. And we flew on, carrying the memory of the dead, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the stories alive. For now, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and stay alive. Jack's Nightmares, signing off. Until next time, survivor.